Thank you. Honourable Clayton Cosgrove.
There's no one else but me. Sir, I've got to say that was a stunning speech. That was a stunning speech. Because poor old Sam Lutuanga was brought out, the sacrificial lamb tonight, to say that this is a stunning bill because you know what it does? It saves $50,000 a year. Now, spread over how many SMEs? How many SMEs? That is a lot of money to the average Kiwi. I accept that. Spread over the thousands of SMEs in this country. And poor old Sam Lutuanga was reeled out. He drew the short straw in the caucus tonight. He's on the ginger ale. He's been told, come down and try and justify this. A bill by a Minister of Small Business who, in the name of his predecessor, the ghost that walks, Rodney Hyde, who came in like Rodney Hyde and said he would slash through compliance costs. And as I said some weeks ago, Mr Banks must have been, affected mortally by his officials who told him to come down. This was the big hit for John Banks, because within this legislation, sir, we have 31 acts that are going to be repealed, which are spent acts, which effectively don't exist. Now, I think it takes a certain amount of intelligence and class to come up with a policy where you come down to the nation's parliament to expunge from the books 31 pieces of legislation which have no effect on anybody, cut no compliance costs, have no effect on any business. That takes a special type of person, in my humble view. And then Sam Lutuanga says the government works on the things that matter. Well, by God, can I ask the member what contribution is made by expunging from the books 31 acts which effectively do not exist? Can I ask the member what contribution to small business is being made by saving a paltry $50,000 per year? Paltry $50,000 per year. But I want to turn to a very interesting clause, sir. Clause 44A bracket B, and I did allude to this previously in the evening, because what this clause...
Well, that's in part 3.
No, I think, sir, if you'll check with your predecessor, Lindsay Tish, he ruled, and I made a speech on this, that this is part of part 1. So with respect, until you've taken advice, I'll keep going. So what we've got, sir, is part 44A bracket B, and what that says is that this clause establishes a procedure for the recognition of persons or classes of persons who are to carry out specified functions and activities for the purposes of the Act. Now, effectively, sir, what that means is you've got to have a damn good memory to recognise persons who have specific functions to carry out the Act. And the difficulty we have, sir, is there is a lot of not only anecdotal evidence, but quasi-judicial evidence, I would wager to say, that the minister in charge of this bill, not the minister in the chair, whose great policy he brought to the Select Committee was based on clamping, and I've said he's a great clamper, this man, an absolutely great clamper.
That member's a happy
wheel
clamper.
clamping, that was his great policy, so I don't direct my comments at that member, sir. I direct them to John Banks, the minister who owns this bill. A minister who is accountable for this bill has to have a damn good memory in order to recognise agencies, persons and classes of persons. And the difficulty we have with this is that the Minister, John Banks, for small business, cannot remember his own name, cannot remember his reflection, who he is, whether it was a sack or a brown envelope, how big the bodyguard was, whether it was a helicopter, a Learjet or a MiG-16, or what house he was in, how big it was, or how big the bodyguard was. So if the minister in the chair who's accountable for implementing the provisions of 44A bracket B cannot remember his own name, then the question I have for the minister in the chair, and I know he will have done some work on this, he will have consulted the Ministry of Health in respect of what one does in respect of amnesia. He will have consulted those officials, those high officials in high office, and he will have an explanation for us. So I ask the minister, can he give us a guarantee that the minister administering this bill will recognise agencies, persons and classes of persons under 44A bracket B who have specified functions and activities for the purposes of this Act? Because that's what worries the people of New Zealand. You can't get 250k, the BMW, the warrant, the flash house and all the baubles of office if you can't remember your own name. Because you are actually running a country here. This is serious. So I say to Mr Banks and to the Minister in the chair that we'd like an assurance around this. But I say in all seriousness that the minister came in and said, well, I'm going to slash through compliance costs, I'm going to make the big breakthrough, I am the impact player for the Parliament, and this, Mr Chair,
Honourable Clayton Cosgrove.
and this is lightweight content in a heavyweight process, and the heavyweight process was actually initiated by the last government. So I'm sure Mr Banks will make a contribution tonight. I'm sure he will be itching to, given that he has had his clearances, given that his memory has returned, given that he knows where he is, who he is, what he is, and how much he took. I'm sure he will now wish to take a call. And I say to Simon Bridges, do not be afraid, Minister, to vacate the chair for Mr Banks. Do not be afraid to do that, because I know that this Parliament will want to hear from him, this Parliament will want assurances from him, but actually this Parliament will want to know why it is that he brings this sort of technical bill, and this after how many months in office, as the big hitter for ACT, who is going to deregulate, slash through red tape. This is the best he can do. Now, I will acknowledge there's a few pages in this. It's probably weighs, I don't know, a quarter of a kg, 155 pages, 144 actually, plus SOPs, been a bit of work in this, bit of ink, bit of paper. But what does it actually do? Well, the best we've heard, and I've got to say I feel sorry for Sam Littlewhite. I really feel sorry for him. We've all been at his place where the whips have told us, come down, it's your turn, you're out on the pole, they're going to have a peek at you, they're going to have a go at you, but it's your turn to take the hit for the government and try and justify this. We've all been there. Fair enough. And I like Sam. He's not a bad bloke. But I say this, the best he could do was this bill will save $50,000 per year. Well, how many SMEs do we have in this country? Hundreds, thousands of SMEs. Well, if you spread 50 grand over all of them, it isn't a big contribution. And I just say to the government, he talked about growth, did my colleague, across the aisle. He talked about growing the economy, all objectives that we across the House want to achieve. But I've got to say, if this is it, is this the 121st point on the 120-point plan? Is this the new one? Is this the big hit? Is this the best they can do? Because I know that they have buried this legislation. They've buried Part 44A, they've buried the whole thing. We know, for instance, because I talked to the Hollywood guys, that this legislation has cost the film producers 50 grand a week, every week, because the classification issues have not been dealt with, and the government sacrificed them because they didn't want any legislation with John Banks's fingerprints on it. They didn't want a profile from him. So suddenly, after he's got his alleged clearances, suddenly it's back in the House, and I know that the minister will be itching himself probably to take a call in this debate. He will want to take a call. He will want to actually justify what he's done to earn his pay, because I've got to say, as an ex-small business person myself, this is piffle. This does nothing to help small business, very little. It will help the Hollywood guys, it'll save them 50k a week, and that's fair enough, that is a good thing. But for every carpenter, plumber, sparky, small business person out there, this is nothing. And if the government's prepared to stand up, and we'll keep the speeches, we'll keep Sam Littlewhite's speeches, and say this is the best we can do, this is the best we can do, thanks to John Banks, and I know he's going to go out, Sam's going to go out to all his small businesses and hand them a copy of this bill and say, don't you feel good about the national government? Don't you feel good about us? Because you should thank us. You should go down on bended knee and thank the national government, because this is what we've delivered for you. Well, I got to say to my colleague over there, I sympathise. I'd be saying to the whips, I want leave for a month after this. I have made the ultimate sacrifice, defending the indefensible, and you've got to ask why it is the minister, in the last 2 hours, John Banks has not taken a call. Even Q-Ball's willing to have a go over there, but Mr Banks won't take a call. Now, if you're so proud of your performance, if this is the big hit for small business, if you're going to be carried aloft in every province of the country by the Chambers of Commerce saying what a wonderful human being, what a great man you are, then surely as a minister you would come down and take a call. Well, I call on Mr Banks to take us through in detail how much it's going to save small business, how many, when, all those things. Because at the moment, there'll be a few people in agriculture reasonably happy about this for the odd label, but your average Joe, your average Kiwi on Struggle Street in a small business knows what this is. I said in a last contribution I made, this is bull, high quality bull, but it is bull nonetheless. and New Zealanders and small businesses can smell it, they know it, and they know when they are being conned. And I say to the National Party, for God's sake, have some sort of, have some sort of righteous indignation over this.
The Honourable Leanne Dalziel.
Mr Chairman, it's very difficult to follow